Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's read some more. So I made a lot of videos today. I was looking my underwear. It's 1:30. So let's try and read this. It's the 24th of February is 2 years ago. It's in 2 weeks. It's 2 years ago Russia did invade Ukraine.
Russian invasion of Ukraine. Russian invasion of Ukraine, a part of the Russo-Ukrainian War. Outline. Map of Ukraine as of 5 February 2024. Details date 24 February 2022 present. 1 year 11 months 2 weeks and 3 days. Location Ukraine Russia Black Sea status ongoing. List of engagements times territorial control times timeline of events. Belligerents Russia Donetsk A. Luhansk A. Supported by Belarus. B. Ukraine. C. Continuously controlled by Ukraine, occupied by Russia, recaptured from Russia. Vladimir Putin. Volodymyr Alexander Zelensky. Dvornikov. Valor 2. Zaluzhny. Gennady Jidko. Oleksandr Siersky. Sergei Surovikin. Commanders and leaders. Valery Gerasimov. Units involved. Order of battle. Order of battle. Strength. Pre-invasion. At border 169,000. 190,000 D 4 5. Pre-invasion. Total 900,000. Military 6. 554,000. Paramilitary 6. In February 2023. 300,000 plus. Active personnel in Ukraine 7. Pre-invasion. Total 196,600. Military 8. 102,000. Paramilitary 8. July 2022. Total up to 700,000. 9. September 2023. Total over 800,000. 10. Casualties and losses. Reports vary widely. See casualties for details. On the 24th of February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine in an escalation of the Russo-Ukrainian War that started in 11, 12, 13. It is 2000.
Yes, there's some weird problem. The computer voice not working. Some new, but the old document it works. I don't know why. So let's read another one.
Plague, disease. Page protected with pending changes. Plague Yersinia pestis sena 200 magnification with a fluorescent label. Specialty infectious disease symptoms: fever, weakness, headache. 1. Usual onset 1-7 days after exposure. 2. Types: bubonic plague, septicemic plague, pneumonic plague. 1. Causes: Yersinia pestis. 2. Diagnostic method: finding the bacterium in a lymph node. Blood sputum. 2. Prevention: plague vaccine. 2. Treatment: antibiotics and supportive care. 2. Medication: gentamicin and fluoroquinolone. 3. Prognosis: almost equal to 10% risk of death, with treatment. 4. Plague is an infectious disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. 2. Symptoms include fever, weakness and headache. 1. Usually this begins 1 to 7 days after exposure. 2. There are 3 forms of plague, each affecting a different part of the body and causing associated symptoms. Pneumonic plague infects the lungs, causing shortness of breath, coughing and chest pain. Bubonic plague affects the lymph nodes, making them swell, and septicemic plague infects the blood and can cause tissues to turn black and die. 2. 1. The bubonic and septicemic forms are generally spread by phlebites or handling an infected animal. 1. Whereas pneumonic plague is generally spread between people through the air via infectious droplets. 1. Diagnosis is typically by finding the bacterium in fluid from a lymph node, blood or sputum. 2. Those at high risk may be vaccinated. 2. Those exposed to a case of pneumonic plague may be treated with preventive medication. 2. If infected, treatment is with antibiotics and supportive care. 2. Typically antibiotics include a combination of gentamicin and fluoroquinolone. 3. The risk of death with treatment is about 10%, while without it is about 70%. 4. Globally, about 600 cases are reported a year. 2. In 2017, the countries with the most cases include the Democratic Republic of Congo, Madagascar and Peru. 2. In the United States, infections occasionally occur in rural areas, where the bacteria are believed to circulate among rodents. 5. It has historically occurred in large outbreaks, with the best known being the Black Death in the 14th century, which resulted in more than 50 million deaths in Europe. 2. Signs and symptoms. There are several different clinical manifestations of plague. The most common form is bubonic plague, followed by septicemic and pneumonic plague. 6. Other clinical manifestations include plague meningitis, plague pharyngitis, and ocular plague. 6. 7. General symptoms of plague include fever, chills, headaches, and nausea. 1. Many people experience swelling in their lymph nodes if they have frequency almost equal to 600 cases a year. 2. Bubonic plague. 1. For those with pneumonic plague, symptoms may, or may not, include a cough, pain in the chest, and hemoptysis. 1. Bubonic plague. Swollen inguinal lymph glands or laparosine infected with the bubonic plague. The swollen lymph glands are termed pubes from the Greek word for groin, swollen gland. Bubo. When a flea bites a human and contaminates the wound with regurgitated blood, the plague-causing bacteria are passed into the tissue. Y. pestis can reproduce inside cells, so even if phagocytosed they can still survive. Once in the body, the bacteria can enter the lymphatic system, which drains interstitial fluid. Plague bacteria secrete several toxins, one of which is known to cause beta-adrenergic blockade. 8. Y. pestis spreads through the lymphatic vessels of the infected human until it reaches a lymph node, where it causes acute lymphadenitis. 9. The swollen lymph nodes form the characteristic boobs associated with the disease. 10. And autopsies of these boobs have revealed them to be mostly hemorrhagic or necrotic. 11. If the lymph node is overwhelmed, the infection can pass into the bloodstream, causing secondary septicemic plague, and if the lungs are seeded, it can cause secondary pneumonic plague. 12. Septicemic plague. Septicemic plague resulting in necrosis. Lymphatics ultimately drain into the bloodstream, so the plague bacteria may enter the blood and travel to almost any part of the body. In septicemic plague, bacterial endotoxins cause disseminated intravascular coagulation, DIC, causing tiny clots throughout the body and possibly ischemic necrosis, tissue death due to lack of circulation/perfusion to that tissue, from the clots. DIC results in depletion of the body's clotting resources so that it can no longer control bleeding. Consequently, there is bleeding into the skin and other organs, which can cause red and / or black patchy rash and hemoptysis / hematemesis, coughing up / vomiting of blood. There are bumps on the skin that look somewhat like insect bites. These are usually red, and sometimes white in the center. Untreated, the septicemic plague is usually fatal. Early treatment with antibiotics reduces the mortality rate to between 4 and 15%. 13, 14, 15. Pneumonic plague. The pneumonic form of plague arises from infection of the lungs. It causes coughing and thereby produces airborne droplets that contain bacterial cells and are likely to infect anyone inhaling them. The incubation period for pneumonic plague is short, usually 2 to 4 days, but sometimes just a few hours. The initial signs are indistinguishable from several other respiratory illnesses. They include headache, weakness, and spitting or vomiting of blood. The course of the disease is rapid, unless diagnosed and treated soon enough, typically within a few hours. Death may follow in 1 to 6 days. In untreated cases, mortality is nearly 100%. 16, 17. Cause. The oriental rat flea, Xenopsilachiopis, engorged with blood after a blood meal. This species of flea is primary vector for the transmission of Yersinia pestis, the organism responsible for bubonic plague in most plague epidemics in Asia, Africa, and South America. Both male and female fleas feed on blood and can transmit the infection. A child bitten by a flea infected with bacterium Yersinia pestis. Y. pestis, a member of the family Yersiniaceae, has caused the bite to become ulcerated. Transmission of Y. pestis to an uninfected individual is possible by any of the following means. Sad smiley 18. Droplet contact, coughing or sneezing on another person. Direct physical contact, touching an infected person including sexual contact. Indirect contact, usually by touching soil contamination or a contaminated surface. Airborne transmission if the microorganism can remain in the air for long periods. Fecal-oral transmission, usually from contaminated food or water sources. Vector-borne transmission carried by insects or other animals. Yersinia pestis circulates in animal reservoirs, particularly in rodents, in the natural foci of infection found on all continents except Australia. The natural foci of plague are situated in a broad belt in the tropical and subtropical latitudes and the warmer parts of temperate latitudes around the globe. Between the parallels 55° N and 40° S. 18. Contrary to popular belief, rats did not directly start the spread of the bubonic plague. It is mainly a disease in fleas, Xenopsilla sciapis, that infested the rats, making the rats themselves the first victims of the plague. Rodent-borne infection in a human occurs when a person is bitten by a flea that has been infected by biting a rodent that itself has been infected by the bite of a flea carrying the disease. The bacteria multiply inside the flea, sticking together to form a plug that blocks its stomach and causes it to starve. The flea then bites a host and continues to feed, event how it cannot quell its hunger, and consequently, the flea vomits blood tainted with the bacteria back into the bite wound. The bubonic plague bacterium then infects a new person and the flea eventually dies from starvation. Serious outbreaks of plague are usually started by other disease outbreaks in rodents or a rise in the rodent population. 19. A 21st century study of a 1665 outbreak of plague in the village of Yarm in England's Derbyshire Dales, which isolated itself during the outbreak, facilitating modern study, found that 3/4 of cases are likely to have been due to human transmission, especially within families, a much bigger proportion than previously thought. 20. Diagnosis. Symptoms of plague are usually non-specific, and to definitively diagnose plague, laboratory testing are required. 21. Y. pestis can be identified through both a microscope and by culturing a sample, and this is used as a reference standard to confirm that a person has a case of plague. 21. The sample can be obtained from blood, mucus, sputum, or aspirate extracted from inflamed lymph nodes. Pubes. 21. If a person is administered antibiotics before a sample is taken, or if there is a delay in transporting the person's sample to a laboratory and / or a poorly stored sample, there is a possibility for false negative results. 21. Polymerase chain reaction, PCR, may also be used to diagnose plague by detecting the presence of bacterial genes such as the PLA gene, plasmogen activator, and CAF1 gene, F1 capsule antigen. 21. PCR testing requires a very small sample and is effective for both alive and dead bacteria. 21. For this reason, if a person receives antibiotics before a sample is collected for laboratory testing, they may have a false negative culture and a positive PCR result. 21. Blood tests to detect antibodies against Y. pestis can also be used to diagnose plague. However, this requires taking blood samples at different periods to detect differences between the acute and convalescent phases of one antibody titers. 21. In 2020, a study about rapid diagnostic tests that detect the F1 capsule antigen, F1 RDT, by sampling sputum or puboaspirate was released. 21. Results show rapid diagnostic F1 RDT test can be used for people who have suspected pneumonic and bubonic plague but cannot be used in asymptomatic people. F1RD may be useful in providing a fast result for prompt treatment and fast public health response, as studies suggest that F1RDT is highly sensitive for both pneumonic and bubonic plague. However, when using therapy test, both positive and negative results need to be confirmed to establish or reject the diagnosis of a confirmed case of plague, and the test result needs to be interpreted within the epidemiological context. Our study findings indicate that although 40 out of 40 people who had the plague in a population of 1,000 were correctly diagnosed, 317 people were diagnosed falsely as positive. 21, 22, 23. Prevention. Vaccination. Bacteriologist Waldemar Haffkine developed the first plague vaccine in 1897. 24, 25. He conducted a massive inoculation program in British India, and it is estimated that 26 million doses of Half-Kind's anti-plague vaccine were sent out from Bombay between 1897 and 1925, reducing the plague mortality by 85%. 24, 26. Since